When Rich was sharing his joy about his walk this morning with his dogs, he didn't know I was going to talk about love dogs, and I'm sure you love dogs. But it reminded me of these words, which I want to read before I speak. These are from a book entitled Prayers to an Evolutionary God by the author William Cleary. Where does our personal story begin, Holy God of all? Could it have begun when supernovas expelled carbon into the open spaces of the universe back in history, billions of years? Is that who we are, participating members of that vast stream of energies that connect in the gigantic web of our real cosmos? Is our personal consciousness a meaningful element in that drama, the very universe becoming self-conscious? How wonderfully and cleverly are we made, only a little less than the angels, said the psalmist. With that gift of consciousness, we do give thanks, lost in wonder. A few years back, I attended a local interfaith meeting. Excuse me. And a woman, someone I've known for a long time, came up to me before the meeting and she said, "Paul, can I ask you something?" And I said, "Sure, what is it?" By the way she asked it, I could see a really questioning look on her face. And I figured, well, this is going to be one of those minister kind of questions. So I was ready. And then she asked me, "Do you believe in God?" I was a little taken aback because it just kind of came out of the blue, you know. Now, I suspect that many people at those meetings often wonder just what a Unitarian Universalist believes about God, but I've never been asked, and so I never volunteered. But I told her briefly that I did believe in God, but probably not in the way she did, or the way most people do. I explained that my idea of God had more to do with what I believe is an evolutionary energetic force that is in and through, around, and flows out of all things, and that we are all part of a mystery in which we live and move and have our being, as the Christian scriptures say. It's what many people like to call God, although I believe it has many names, none of which are adequate to describe it. As the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching says, the way that can be named is not the eternal way. I told her I didn't believe in a deity out there somewhere, but rather in the Buddha nature or the Christ consciousness within all sentient beings. And I expected a little discussion, but instead she just smiled and said, "Okay," took her coffee and went and sat down. I kept wondering why she asked me this, so I found her afterward and asked her. She said that she had gone to a funeral of someone who was a Unitarian Universalist with a couple of mutual friends, and that she was surprised to find that there were no prayers offered. Instead, there were some readings by Emerson and a few other people and some poems and songs, but no prayer. My name came up after the funeral, which made me laugh, when one of them said, "Well, you know, Paul was a Unitarian Universalist." What interested me about this exchange was that her initial question wasn't, "Paul, do you believe in prayer?" or "Paul, do you pray?" Because that's what she found surprising at the funeral, right? But rather, "Paul, do you believe in God?" And I suppose that the two, prayer and God, go hand in hand in most people's minds. After all, the main definition of prayer, according to the dictionary, is an address as a petition to a God, or the large capital G, or a God with a small g, in word or thought. And when most people pray, they pray to the God of their understanding. Some people pray to saints too, or to ancestors. Some people pray to the spirits of nature or animals. But in all of these cases, people are praying. They're petitioning, they're asking, they're begging something of a power, and that power is usually out there somewhere, separate from the person who is praying. In most cases, that power is also considered to be all-powerful, everlasting, the creator of all things and separate from the creation. So when this woman told me why she asked if I believed in God, I understood the connection, because in her mind, a doubt had been created at this funeral when she heard no prayers recited. And this required my usual little explanation about the differences in the way various Unitarian Universalists pursue their own spirituality. I told her that I did pray, but again, not in the same way that she did, or that probably many other people. In fact, I told her that my praying, such as it is, was probably different than many other Unitarian Universalists, since not all Unitarian Universalists pray alike or even pray at all. She smiled again and said, okay, and that was that. But this little exchange really made me wonder back then about this subject of prayer. And off and on, I've thought about it again and spoken about it now every now and then. And so, as I did back then, I come to you today with really no profound views on the subject, but only some things to share that I think about prayer. And very often, I think of these things in the middle of the night when I wake up. I'm chronic insomniac, I'd like to tell you. And I figure that if I'm going to think about them, I can at least take some comfort in knowing that perhaps at least a few of you two, after today, will wake up in the middle of the night and think about this, and I won't feel so alone in my insomnia. Now, I don't have a specific style of prayer that I use, and I don't pray to a deity out there somewhere. I suppose that because of my background in the Christian tradition and my Buddhist spiritual understanding and my experience with other traditions, that my praying ranges from the standard Dear God kind of prayer to the more meditative style of prayer of the Buddhist, the Hindu, or the Sikh tradition, as we just heard from Sanatan Prabhupada. I'm uncomfortable with rote prayers, like so-called Lord's Prayer. And I shy away from any prayer that is gender specific, although I'm much better with references to the feminine image of God than I am with male images. Most times, my praying is simply a dialogue, a conversation in my head with that divine something. And I often get a clearer picture of the answer when I do these things like talk to myself. It's a dialogue. I suppose that this could be called just talking to myself, which is what I generally do silently. Sometimes I do it out loud, and Lisa will say, "Are you talking to me?" And no, it wasn't you. But I do prefer to think of it as talking to myself with a capital S, and being open to hearing what that self has to say, the oversoul, as Emerson called it. Often, especially when I'm angry at that divine something, I will even yell and curse and scream and express my disbelief in it, which I'm happy to know is a very common thing and accepted, especially in the Jewish tradition. I mean, just read some of the Hebrew prophets when they rail at God, how they did that all the time. So I think I'm in good company. While I'm working at my computer, I'll sometimes listen to kirtan, as we just heard, the chanting of prayers or the names of God from various traditions. Personally, I think many Unitarian Universalists pray in the same way, a very eclectic, non-specific way. I won't ask for a show of hands, but perhaps many of you pray in this way. All people pray in one way or another. Not necessarily, though, in that main dictionary definition way, or at least not intention. The second definition of prayer in the dictionary is an earnest request or wish. Sometimes that earnest request or wish is made to some unnamed, undefined force. Please, God, let the Mets win again. My wife prays that almost every day these days. Please let my refund check arrive soon. Please let that clanking that I hear in my engine on my car not be anything that's going to cost me $4,000. I suspect many of us have been also praying quite a lot for the past few years. Whoever heard those prayers came through for us in November of 2020. That's not to say that Unitarian Universalists don't pray in the commonly accepted manner of addressing a power greater than themselves. I haven't been to every Unitarian church or met a majority of you, but there are probably many who do pray to a deity out there or to a specific image of God. I think specifically perhaps of our Unitarian Universalist Christian friends or our pagan sisters and brothers, Wiccan sisters and brothers too. There may be some who hold on to the type of praying they grew up with or knew before becoming Unitarian Universalists. But for most, I suspect prayer is less specific. But the dictionary definition of prayer is just a surface definition of what prayer is. All of us at one time or another, I think, have cried out in some way, for example, for help with a problem in time of grief, when we're in pain, or we see a loved one in pain. When we have finally reached that darkest place we have ever been, perhaps, in our lives. The Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, prayer begins at the edge of emptiness. Or perhaps it was when we were overjoyed by a sunset, or the sight of a billion stars on a crystal clear night, or the first sight of our infant child or grandchild. Each of these times touched us in such a deep and profound manner that we cried out to that divine something, whether it was articulated and understood in that way or not. The members of my congregation will tell you that I often refer to the images of the Hubble telescope, and now we're going to be getting from the James Webb telescope, right? And I see those images and something deep inside me wells up and often brings tears of joy to my eyes. And all I can do is say, as Anne Lamott, the author, writes about that most famous of one-word prayers, wow. Just wow. Sometimes I remember to say thank you to who or whatever may be listening, because I'm so grateful to be part of this evolutionary process. I also remember a few years ago when our daughter was in a very serious car accident on Route 8, she and her then boyfriend. And she was at the hospital. She was taken to the hospital in Morristown. And while we were driving to the hospital, I was trying to remain calm. And all I could do was slip back without thinking into the kind of praying that I'd been raised with. Please, God, let her be okay. Please, God, don't let her die. And she didn't. And apart from almost losing her arm and 18 or so operations, she's okay. In fact, she's thriving. She's a very graphic artist in Philadelphia with a great business of her own, expanding. She's a musician, plays the bass, all sorts of things. And so she's fine. Somebody heard that. Now, I know that my daughter's recovery was due to the diligence and the skill of an amazing surgeon and a staff of trained professionals who took care of her during that time, and to her own tenacity and courage, not to mention the incredible support of my wife, Lisa, who tended her wounds when I couldn't even bear to look at her, and took her to every operation that she needed. Have you had these kinds of experiences? It's times like these when we're confronted with the exigencies of life, the disasters, the pain, the sorrows, and even the great joys, that this primal urge to call out, to cry out, to ask for help, or to say thank you, wells up inside of us. This is prayer at a really basic primal level. It's what Jungian psychologists Anne and Barry Ulanov call primary speech. They write this, they say, we all speak many languages. We speak in neat sequences of cause and effect, knowing what we want to say and saying it with something like measurable logic. We speak in signs and symbols. But in all these worlds of discourse, of thought, feeling, no language is quite so fundamental and so important as one many of us are not even aware that we speak, the language of prayer. Prayer is primary speech, they say. It is that primordial discourse in which we assert, however clumsily or eloquently, our own being. Primary speech usually refers to the first sounds or words that an infant makes when trying to articulate the images, feelings that it's being bombarded with. We don't remember, but look at babies when they all this stuff coming in. It's information overload. What do I do? An infant sees the smiling face of its mother and it coos or it cries when that image leaves the room. It doesn't know mother yet, but it knows the image, the experience. And from deep within its being, it articulates in this primary speech its love and its need for mother. And all animals do this. And prayer, however you do it, is the primary speech of our deepest selves, of our being. So then how do we do it? Well, there have been a couple of examples today of how some people pray. The poem at the beginning of by Rumi gave an example of one person's prayer. Poetry itself can be a type of prayer. I think about the many poems by the wonderful Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets. Many of the responsive readings we find in the back of our hymnal are an example. Is there a specific manner of UU prayer? I haven't found it. I suspect even that some of us don't even really care for the word prayer, and I can understand that. When I think of how I pray, I suppose it could be called just wishful thinking or hoping. So does prayer work? I don't know. I know that some people say that all prayers are answered. If you get what you want, God said yes, and if you don't get it, God said no. And I find that kind of understanding of prayer a bit childish. But what about the parent who prays as they're rushing to a school when there's been a shooting like the one in Uvalde? Some children survived. Others, far too many, didn't. Did God hear the prayers of one parent but not others? Was the child that lived better than the one that died? Were the parents of the surviving children more holy or worthy in this God's eyes than the parents of those that died? And so the prayers of those parents weren't heard. You know, as a minister, I cringe every time I hear someone say, well, God allowed such and such a thing to happen because God has a plan. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in the past few months, especially about every single mass shooting that occurs. And I have to say this, if your God has a plan and it includes the shooting of children going to school or people shopping for food or going to the movies or to a disco in a mass shooting, then you need a new God. Because your God's a monster. And I think we're all sick and tired of the thoughts and prayers response of leaders that care more about support for the NRA than the lives of human beings. We've heard that far too many times. Thoughts and prayers. I mean, I can understand the prayers part to some extent, but thoughts, what does that even mean? We're thinking about you and the child you lost in that mass shooting, or that wife or husband or friend you lost. What are you thinking about when you say that? Frankly, I think they're thinking, boy, I hope this doesn't affect my contributions from the NRA. I got to be careful what I say. Here's the thing, if your thoughts and prayers don't lead you to some kind of positive action, then they mean absolutely nothing, whether there's a god or goddess who hears them or not. Again, I'm reminded of Rabbi Heschel, who asked why he was marching with Martin Luther King from Selma to Montgomery on the Sabbath instead of going to synagogue and praying. And his reply was that he was praying with his feet. Action. Or the familiar words that some of us know from the book of James in the Christian scriptures, where James says, what does it mean, brothers and sisters, if you see someone who is hungry and has no clothes and has no place to live, and they come and you say, oh, be well, be happy, God bless you, and you walk away, but you don't clothe them or feed them or give them a place to live. What does that mean? And then he goes on to say, faith without works is dead. It means nothing. And it doesn't have to be heroic. Any simple action, writing an email to your representative, bringing a meal to a shut-in or someone who's ill, making a phone call, marching in a protest. You know, during the pandemic, we all found ways to help, to do things for others. Actions do indeed speak louder than words. And they speak louder than prayers and thoughts. As for answers to prayer, I do know that I've experienced on more than one occasion what appears to be a response to my prayers. I confess that I usually notice that response when the answer is positive. Sometimes, as in the case of my daughter's recovery, I inwardly know that it's not due to some outside force, but to a logical, progressive procedure and the skill of qualified people, as I said. Cause and effect, as the Dodenhoff said, are always at play. There was an accident, there was my daughter, there was a qualified surgeon on duty, he performed multiple surgeries, and she recovered. Cause and effect. But I still asked with gratitude, why was Dr. Fedora the doctor on call that particular night? Coincidence, some would say. He's considered one of the best hand and arm surgeons in the state. Why was he on? Some would say coincidence, and perhaps it is. If so, I'm grateful to the God of coincidence, or as Jung would call it, synchronicity. So the subject of prayer doesn't really lend itself to easy examination unless you want easy answers. And as Unitarian Universalists, we're not big on easy answers, but we are big on questions and sitting with them, like Zen koans. As I said, now I've got more questions to ask than profound things to say about prayer. Maybe I've sparked some questioning in you to explore the subject a little further. But I hope that whatever you think about the subject, you'll let me know. Email me, and if you start thinking about it around 4 a.m. some night, don't call me, just email me. You can find me on Facebook, and we can chat about it. Maybe we can even pray about it. I want to close with a poem by another poet, a favorite poet of mine, Ellen Bass. And this is called Pray for Peace. Pray to whoever you kneel down to. Jesus nailed to his wooden or marble or plastic cross, his suffering face bent to kiss you. Buddha still under the bow tree in scorching heat. Adonai, Allah, raise your arms to Mary, that she may lay her palm on your brows. To Shekinah, queen of heaven and earth, to Inanna in her strict descent. Hawk or wolf or great whale, record keeper of time before, time now, time ahead, pray. Bow down to terriers and shepherds and Siamese cats, fields of artichokes and elegant strawberries. Pray to the bus driver who takes you to work. Pray on the bus. Pray for everyone riding that bus and for everyone riding buses all over the world. If you haven't been on a bus in a long time, climb the few steps, drop some silver, and pray. Waiting in line for the movies, for the ATM, for your latte and croissant, offer your plea. Make your eating and drinking a supplication. Make your slicing of carrots a holy act. Each translucent layer of onion a deeper prayer. Make the brushing of your hair a prayer. Every strand its own voice singing in the choir in your head. As you wash your face, the water slipping through your fingers, a prayer. Water, softest thing on earth, gentleness that wears away rock. Making love, of course, is already a prayer. Skin and open mouths, worshiping that skin, the fragile case we are poured into, each caress a season of peace. If you're hungry, pray. If you're tired, Pray to Gandhi and Dorothy Day, Shakespeare, Sappho, Sojourner Truth. Pray to the angels and to the ghost of your grandfather. When you walk to your car, to the mailbox, to the video store, to the video store, let each step be a prayer that we all keep our legs, that we do not blow off someone else's legs or crush their skulls. And if you are riding on a bicycle or a skateboard in a wheelchair, each revolution of the wheel is a prayer that as the earth revolves, we will do less harm, less harm, less harm. And as you work, typing with a new manicure, a tiny palm tree painted on one pearlescent nail, or delivering soda, or drawing good blood into rubber-capped vials, writing on a blackboard with yellow chalk, twirling pizzas, pray for peace. With each breath in, take in the faith of those who have believed when belief seemed foolish, who persevered. With each breath out, cherish. Pull weeds for peace. Turn over in your sleep for peace. Feed the birds for peace. Each shiny seed that spills onto the earth, another second of peace. Wash your dishes, call your mother, drink wine. Shovel leaves or snow or trash from your sidewalk. Make a path. Fold a photo of a dead child around your Visa card. Know your crust of prayer. Scoop your prayer water from the gutter. Mumble along like a crazy person stumbling your prayer through the streets.
If you enjoyed this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video.